ovako, ja sam vam poslala onaj raspored kao što smo se i dogovorili, dakle poslala sam raspored sa terminima održavanja prezentacija, sa parovima oponenata i sa temama. Imate li možda, da li ste primili i da li imate neko pitanje u vezi s tim? Nema pitanja, pretpostavljam. Primili ste, samo mi to potvrdite.
Da.
Da, svi, odlično. Dobro. Mislim da je iz tog rasporeda sve jasno, dakle kao što sam najavila prošli put, prošle nedelje smo imali uvodni čas sa tehničkim uputstvima i malo smo pričali o tome kako pripremiti efektan uvod i kako pripremiti efektan zaključak. A danas prelazimo na glavni deo, odnosno kako smo se dogovorili na to kako oformiti jedan snažan argument. Pa da počnemo. Ono što vam savjetujem jeste da pažljivo slušate i da hvatate beleške. Dakle, nema ovde puno teorije, ja ću vam dosta primera davati, pa vi možete sebi tu i tamo zabeležiti, jer svaki od tih primera predstavlja izvestan model kako možete napraviti jedan argument. So, I'll switch to English now. Let's start. When you start preparing for persuasive speech, now you all have your topic, so you can start preparing. What would be the first step? Of course, to do some research on the given topic to reach your own informed point of view. That's, of course, the first step. After that, what's the main step? Well, of course, after doing some research, you should formulate the main message or the main idea of your speech. Of course, that would be mainly the topic that you have, but maybe you can develop it a bit, maybe you can add some details, maybe you can decide on a particular aspect to cover in your speech, and so on and so on. Anyway, you have to formulate the main idea of your speech, what you want to achieve with that, to convince my audience of this and that, to be completely clear about the main point of your speech. Okay, so number one, doing some research. Number two, formulating the main message of the speech. What's then the third step? Brainstorming, of course. But I would say brainstorming for potential arguments, both pro and against the given claim, no matter which side you are supporting. So once again, what would be the third step? Now, after doing some research, now you're clear about the main idea of your speech, you have to brainstorm. You have to start searching for potential ideas or potential arguments by which you're going to support your claim, or through which you're going to prove that your point of view is actually the true one or the right one. So as I said, brainstorming, but brainstorming for potential arguments, both pro and against the given claim. And now my question for you is, why should you do that? Why searching for both, for arguments both pro and against, no matter which side you are supporting? Why? Any guesses?
Maybe to be prepared to oppose your opponent, to know what he is going to say.
Exactly. So you're on the right track. So you have to think both ways. Because no matter which side you are supporting, you will be better prepared in the first place to rebut the counter arguments of your opponent, and at the same time you will be able to build stronger arguments of your own because you're already aware of the opposite idea, or you're already aware of all the ideas opposing your point of view. So when you're aware of them, when you know, when you're familiar with these ideas, it will be easier for you to build arguments that will easily rebut them from the very start. Okay, that would be step number 3. Now, step number 4. So let's say after this brainstorming, you will end up with a bunch of different potential ideas, different potential arguments. But in your speech, you need only 3. So selection, of course, is the next step. So you should choose the 3 arguments that you that in your opinion are the strongest ones, the ones they can easily rebut the counter arguments, or the ones that can support your claim in the right way. So once again, from the very beginning, what's the first step? Doing some research. Number 2, formulating the main message or the main idea of your speech. Number 3, brainstorming for potential arguments, both pro and against the given claim. Number 4, choosing 3 strongest arguments among all of those that you brainstorming for. And what's, of course, the next logical step, or step number 5, to develop 3 strong arguments. So, okay, so previously you selected 3 ideas or 3 potential arguments, and now you have to develop them. And that is our main question for today: how to develop a proper argument. Well, now listen to me carefully. Each of your arguments will have in its structure 3 obligatory elements. The first one is the claim, the second one, the data, and the third one, the reasoning. So I will repeat these terms several times during this lecture, so don't worry. It will be quite clear and logical. So once again, what is the structure of your argument, or what is the structure of a proper argument? Well, it consists of 3 elements: the claim, the data, and the reasoning. Now, what's the point of each of your arguments? It's simple: to give logical reasons to other people that will make them change their own minds about a particular topic or issue. Actually, to convince others to agree with your point of view. That's the main thing. So that's the point of each of your arguments: to give logical reasons to other people why they should change their mind about a particular issue and adopt your point of view. So let's see how the structure of a proper argument actually functions. So I will explain each of these 3 elements. I think the claim is already quite clear. So what is the claim? This is your initial statement, the one that you want to defend. This is actually the statement, one of the statements by which you are going to prove the given topic, or the main idea of your speech. That's the claim. So the initial statement you would like your audience to agree with. What's the data? The data is actually the evidence that you present to your audience and that will show that your claim is accurate. So that is the data. The data is actually the evidence that supports the claim. So the evidence you're going to present to your audience to show that your claim is accurate. And finally, what's reasoning? The reasoning is the logical connection between the data and the claim. Or in other words, it shows your audience why and how your data supports your claim. So once again, the claim, the data, the reasoning. You always apply the same model, these 3 elements within an argument. So the claim, the initial statement, so the initial idea. So you will have, so this is not a topic of your speech, don't be confused. So this is actually, so in order to defend your topic, you're going to think of 3 ideas, 3 potential arguments. Well, idea number 1 is actually the claim number 1, the claim of your first argument. Then you have to somehow prove by something that it is true. How? By using some data, or in other words, by using some evidence. And then comes the reasoning, the third part, by which you're going to explain to your audience how and why this data supports your claim. You will actually explain the logical connection between the data and the claim. Now, I'll give you a simple example from everyday life, and I think it will be clear then. So let's say, let's take a simple situation. For example, you want to convince your friend to have lunch at a local burger place, let's say. Okay, so in order to convince someone of something, you need to formulate an argument. Okay, let's use our model. Now, what's the claim? We have to start from that. We have to have some initial statement. So what's the initial statement? We should go to that burger place to have lunch today. That's your claim. Okay, this is what you want your friend to be convinced of. Okay, this is the one that you are defending. We should go to that burger place for lunch today, let's say. Okay, now that's not enough. How to convince anyone of anything? By using some evidence, by using some data. What could be your data in this case? Well, maybe something like it has the best fries. Okay, fine. This is a piece of evidence supporting this claim. And now we need some reasoning. Now you have to explain what's the logical connection. So, how this data supports your claim. Well, since we both like fries and they have the best fries, this is definitely the best place to have lunch at, for example. So in total, this argument will be something like, we should go to that burger place to have lunch today um, because they have the best fries. And since we both like fries, this is definitely the best place to have lunch at. This is it. Okay? Short, simple, and easy. This is it. This is the model. The claim, the data, some evidence, and then the reasoning. It might seem to you in these examples, and this is an example from everyday life. So it might seem to you that this reasoning part is not necessary, that your friend will understand the connection between the data and the claim, even if you don't explicate it. So even if you don't put it explicitly. Okay, that's fine. That's fine when we are talking about everyday situations like this one. But your task is a more difficult one. So you have to convince not only one person, but you have to convince your audience of a certain point of view. So, and you have to be sure that each member of your audience understands the logical connection between the data and the claim. So, to be on the safe side, you should be as explicit as possible about your reasoning, okay, or about this connection between your data and your claim in your speech. So just to make things clear, make sure that you always make your reasoning explicit. Don't skip it. If it is not clear to someone, they won't be convinced of your idea. And that's it. That's why you have to be on the safe side. Now, so this was just a general example. But now let's go into some details here. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I'm going to show you different types of arguments that you can use, or different ways of thinking, or different actually reasoning patterns that you can use in your arguments. So let's start with the question, what could actually be your evidence, or what can serve as some data in your argument? In the first place, that could be an example. So it can be your personal example, it can be, I don't know, an example from everyday life, or whatever, any kind of example that you find typical of a particular issue, so to say. So what kind of reasoning would you have in this situation? So you're taking one example. That means that you are starting from something specific and then you generalize. This is what we call inductive reasoning. So basically, you start from specific instances and then you make a generalization, or you generalize. So your data is a specific instance in this case of a larger phenomenon. So again, I will show you, I'll give you an example to show how this works. Okay, so let's say that you want to argue that there is still a need for public libraries in this city. Okay, fine. Give me an argument. Fine. How to build it? Let's give it the claim, the data, and the reasoning. So what is the claim in this case? Public libraries are still needed in this city. Fine. Give me some data to support it. Okay, or a piece of evidence. Okay, let's use an example. I'll use my personal example. Let's say that I'm still a student. So I could say something like, as a student, I visit public libraries on a regular basis to check out a book or to have a quiet place to work and study, sometimes even to use the internet. There are many students in this city, so it is obvious then that they all use public libraries for these purposes, and that they are still very needed in this city. That's it. You see how it works? So you take one example, in this case, your particular example. You are a student, so as a student, as a typical student, I use a public library for this, and that. And like me, there are many students in this city, so they also use it on a regular basis, which means that public libraries are still used by a large number of young people, and they're still needed in this city. I'll give you another example of an argument developed from an example. These examples can include testimonies of other people or some statistics. So let's say that you want to argue that the economy of this state is doing poorly. Okay, fine. So what is the claim? The economy of this state is doing poorly. Fine. Okay, give me some data to support this. Let's use an example. To support this claim, you want to use, for an example, you're going to take three largest cities in the state. Okay, so according to some statistics, three of the largest cities in the state have a growing unemployment and a shrinking economy. So if it is the case with the largest cities in this country, it is obvious that then the economy on the whole is doing poorly. That's it. Okay, so as you can see, you use an example, you start from a specific case, and then you generalize. But there is one thing you have to be really careful about if you want to use this kind of argument or this type of reasoning. Your examples have to be really typical and representative. Otherwise, they cannot be generalized, or the generalization is not convincing. So you have to be careful about that. And in order to make the whole thing more convincing, if it is possible, try to use several examples. That's even better. This is how you can actually develop your argument. This is the part. So the data part is actually the one that you are adding something. So you can add several examples to make to build a better support for your claim. Fine. On the other hand, we can also have arguments from deduction. So actually, so this is a different type of argument, and in this type we apply the opposite reasoning pattern. So the first one was induction from specific to general, and in this case we are going the opposite way, so from general to specific. So you take a general principle and then you apply it to a specific case. I'll show you an example to see how it works. So you want to argue that your child should attend preschool in order to do better in later education. Okay, fine. Let's start from the beginning. What's the claim? My child should attend preschool in order to do better in his later education. Okay, give me some data, some evidence for that. Now, see, if you want to use deduction, you have to give something which is generally known. So you can say something like a study shows that attending preschool is correlated with more success in later education. So, okay, fine. So this is a study showing a general case. So once again, so a study shows that attending preschool is correlated with more success in a later education. And now the reasoning. So you have to show the connection, as I said, to explain the logical connection. So it connects the data and the claim. So you can say, so what is, if it works in the case of all other children, it is logical to expect that it will work in the case of my child as well. So that's why my child should attend preschool in order to do better in his later education. And that's it. Okay, so in this particular case, as I said, we go the opposite way. So from a general principle which is then applied, or so from a principle that is true for children in general, and then it is applied to a specific case, the case of one particular child. That's it. Okay. Yes, and if you use these general, so if you use deduction, if you use these general principles or general ideas as your data, you have to make sure that they are based on some on something well-founded. So it has to be based on something firm, like a fact, a well-known fact, a scientific fact, some statistics, some expert testimonies. Otherwise, it won't seem accurate. Okay, so if you want to use something, some general idea as your data, to use deduction, as in this case, then you have to make sure that this is something which is based on facts, statistics, expert testimonies, and things like that. Okay, let's move on to the third type. So in order to prove your claim, you can use the reasoning pattern that follows the idea of cause and effect relationship. So again, I'll give you an example. So let's say that you want to argue that a particular person should stop smoking. Fine. So what's the claim? You should stop smoking. Give me a reason for that. Give me something, some piece of evidence that this is really so. Okay, some data. It is well known that smoking damages lung cells. Okay, and then which increases the likelihood of lung disease. So it is obvious that because of this connection between smoking and lung disease, you should stop smoking. That's cause and effect, okay? Smoking causes lung disease, so you use simply this cause and effect relation to develop your argument. Okay, so basically it boils down to proving how smoking is how smoking causes lung disease. You explaining this connection. So once again, the claim you should stop smoking. It is well known that smoking damages lung cells, which increases the likelihood of lung disease. So because of this. So since smoking obviously causes lung disease, you should stop smoking. That's it. That's an argument based on cause and effect relation. Okay, the fourth type, that's an argument by analogy. I suppose you all know what's analogy, but okay, anyway, let's explain it briefly. In quite simpler terms, what's analogy? So if two items are alike in some respects, they will be alike in other respects as well. So if they are alike in some respects, then it is somehow logical that they will be alike in some other respects as well. That's analogy. How to use it to develop your argument? Again, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you want to argue that the United States should follow Sweden's healthcare model. Okay, fine. Let's develop an argument. So what's your claim? The United States should should adopt a healthcare system used in Sweden. Fine. Give me some data. What could be the data here? So there is a report that says that Sweden's healthcare costs were reduced significantly in 5 years. And then reasoning by analogy, since the United States and Sweden are alike in the sense that both of them are highly developed countries, then we can conclude that what worked in Sweden will work in or should work in the United States as well. So that's why the United States should adopt the same model of healthcare system. That's it. Okay, so you're using analogy to prove your point. So once again, what's the claim? The United States should adopt Sweden's model of healthcare system. The data, there is a report saying that Sweden's healthcare system reduced its costs significantly in 5 years. So since the United States and Sweden are alike in the sense that they are both highly developed countries, we can conclude that if something worked in Sweden, we can easily suppose that it will work in the United States as well. And that's it. That's how analogy works, if you want to use it to prove your point. Okay, the next type, that could be, we can call it an argument by sign. That means that you basically use the observation of one item to show that another item is occurring. I know it sounds confusing, but I'll give you an example. Let's say that your claim is, or you want to argue the following thing. I see smoke, there must be a fire. That's it. So smoke is a sign of fire. So what's your claim? The claim is there is some fire. What's the data? Well, the physical observation of smoke. The data is I can see smoke. And the reasoning process, smoke is always a sign of fire. So you can also use these things. I mean, this is maybe too simple, but you can use something that is physically obvious to prove your point. For example, to use something that is observable, you can use it as a sign of something else occurring, as in this case. So I want to prove that there is some fire. So my claim is, once again, there's some fire because I can see some smoke, and smoke is a sign of fire. So that's the way of thinking used in this case. And the last type is an argument from authority. So you basically, so what kind of data you use here? So something claimed by qualified sources, some expertise, some experts' testimonies, and things like that. Argument in which authority in which sense? I'll show you through an example. Let's say that I want to argue that climate change is real. So let's say the claim is climate change is a real phenomenon. Fine. How to prove that? Well, I use some data given by authority, some kind of authority. In this particular case, that will be some scientific authority. So I could use something like there is a study conducted by experts in the field that shows that there is scientific consensus around the issue of climate change. Or 90% of scientists agree that this phenomenon is real. And then the reasoning. So what experts in the field indicate is true is likely to be true. Okay, so on the basis of this, we prove that climate change is a real phenomenon. That means argument from authority. So as I said, something given by a qualified source. Once again, in this particular example, the claim is climate change is a real phenomenon. Give me some data. Okay, fine. There is a study showing that there is scientific consensus around the issue, and 90% of scientists believe or argue that or agree that the phenomenon is real. As experts, so since this is claimed by experts in the field, it is likely to be true. And this is basically it. But if you use this argument from authority, you always have to clearly state the source. So you have to cite your sources out loud in your speech. So you have to say who's the authority you're citing. A scientist, a scientific study, some statistical report, whatever it is. Okay, but in this particular case, you have to cite your source, so that we as audience can recognize that this is really an authority in the field. Okay, fine. And now I want to show you another thing that you can use in your arguments. Sometimes you can develop your argument from a counter argument, or actually you can start from a counter argument to develop your own argument. So I'll show you how it works again through an example. You simply, in a way, incorporate a counter argument in your own argument. So let's get back to the example about public libraries. I believe you remember it from the very beginning of this lecture. So let's say the claim is, I know some of you might think that public libraries are not needed anymore, but this is not true. So you see how it works. In this particular case, you start with a counter argument and then you negate it. And this is your claim. Basically, you are trying to prove that this is not true, that what you previously said is actually not true. That could be an efficient way to develop your own argument. So you simply develop your own argument starting from a counter argument. This could be particularly efficient in proving your point. So once again, let's say that the claim is the following one. I know some of you might think that public libraries are not needed anymore, but this is not true. And then, of course, you have to give some data. What could be the data? The research shows that a vast majority of students and people who do some intellectual work use public libraries on a regular basis. Okay, and now the reasoning. So this is the reasoning is actually again generalization. So what kind of argument is this? Well, not only so the one that uses a counter argument as its starting point, but it is actually based on an example. So we use a specific case and then we generalize. So the reasoning is the following one. So this sample makes a significant portion of citizens here, so that it can be concluded that still a large number of people in this city uses libraries on a regular basis. So that's why they're still important institutions in this city. Something like that. But the main thing here to notice is how to develop it from a counter argument. So you basically give the counter argument in your claim, and then you negate it, and then through your data and your reasoning, you're trying to prove that this counter argument is actually not true. There is another way in which you can rebut the counter argument. This is something which is called value hierarchy. You don't have to actually remember the term, but it is important to understand how this functions or how it works. So again, I'll give you an example. So let's say that one wants to argue that the United States should adopt a counterterrorism measure and increase surveillance of its citizens. Okay, fine. So let's again try to use a counter argument, which could be a pretty strong one in this particular case, to develop our own point of view. So let's start with this one. So what could be your claim? So I know that some of you believe that we should not increase surveillance because that undermines our freedom and right to privacy. Okay, fine. So this is what the opponent thinks, so to say. So this is the counter argument. So once again, you put it in your claim. So it will be like, I know that some of you think that we should not increase surveillance of our citizens because it undermines our freedom and right to privacy. And then in your data and your reasoning, you're doing the following thing. You can say something like, you're correct that privacy is important. However, in order to truly enjoy the benefits of living in a free society, we must all feel that we are safe. Without a feeling of security, we will never benefit from the freedoms we have. So that's why we should adopt a counterterrorism measure and increase surveillance on our citizens. So see what the speaker is doing in this particular case. So he or she values the opposing side's freedom concerns, but also states that state safety is more important. That's why it is called a value hierarchy. So you admit, okay, your value is fine. So you admit that there is some value in the opposing view, but the value you are giving is more important. That's why it is called value hierarchy. So this is another way in which you can incorporate a counter argument in your own argument. So you admit its value. So you say, yes, okay, yes, it's true. that freedom is important and privacy is important, but we cannot truly enjoy in living in our free society if we are not safe. So what you're doing, okay, fine, I admit that privacy is important, but safety is more important. So that's why we should adopt this measure and increase surveillance on our citizens, and so on and so on. And what is good about using these counter arguments? You don't have to do this. I just want to show you several options how to develop your arguments. But using counter arguments could be efficient sometimes because in the first place you appear more knowledgeable about a topic, you seem less biased, you seem more trustworthy, and so on and so on. So this is a different kind of impression you actually make. That's why I'm explaining this to you. And that will be it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you several types of arguments, several types of data you can use, and several, at the same time, several types of reasoning patterns that you can use to develop your arguments. Developing your arguments, if you remember, the beginning of our story was the fifth step. So when you develop your arguments, what's the next step? The sixth one. To put your arguments in order. What kind of order? So this is my suggestion. To put your best argument last. And my question for you is why? Why to put the best one last? Hmm?
To make a lasting impact on your audience, maybe.
Exactly, because of this last impression that we also talked about in the previous lesson. That's why. So put your best argument last, put your second best argument first, and put your weakest argument in the middle. So second best, okay, it's not maybe the best one, but okay, fine, a good one to start the whole story with. The weakest argument, the one you're not, it's fine, but maybe you're not completely sure about it. Put it, if you have such an argument, maybe you will be completely satisfied with all three arguments. That's great. But if you have such a situation, you have that third argument, maybe not the best one, put it in the middle. Why? It is not so obvious if you put it in the middle. And then comes the best one as the last one to make this big last impression. This is just a suggestion to be smart when ordering your arguments. And what's then the final step? To add the missing parts of your speech. So now you have three developed arguments. What's before that? Introduction plus overview. What's after these arguments? A review plus conclusion. And you can also add some signposts, some linking words to connect the ideas, to make these connections more obvious to the audience, to make to actually make this flow of your speech smooth. And that would be all. So then you have a complete persuasive speech. So that's all when it comes to the explanation I have for you today. Any questions? No? Dobro, onda samo preći ću sad na srpski, samo da vam objasnim šta je ono što ćemo raditi dakle sledećeg puta. Za sledeći čas treba da se pripremite, dakle u stvari sledeći čas nam je poslednji pripremni čas pred početak vaših prezentacija, kao što znate iz samog rasporeda. Sada, dakle imat ćete domaći za sledeći put, i zapravo vaš domaći zadatak, dakle daje vam dve teme od kojih treba da izaberete jednu I na tu temu treba da sastavite 3 argumenta, dužine ne više od jedne kucane strane u Wordu sa recimo 1,5 proredom. Znači, ne mora biti preterano dugačko, ali ne interesuje me uvod, ne interesuje me zaključak, dakle samo 3 argumenta koji prate ovaj model. The claim, the data, the reasoning. Ono što možda nekome nije bilo jasno jeste to dok sam objašnjavala. Dakle, ja sam davala vrlo kratke primere zato što nemamo puno vremena. Naravno, vaši argumenti će biti mnogo razvijeniji i bogatiji. Gde je prostor za obogaćivanje argumenata? The data. Znači, to je mesto gde možete koristiti, možete koristiti u jednom argumentu različite vrste dokaza. To može biti negde, možete koristiti primer, možete koristiti više primera, možete tome pridružiti i neku statistiku, možete tome pridružiti i nešto od onoga što smo rekli argument from authority, some expert testimonies, things like that. Možete imati različite vrste dokaza koji će vas onda, dakle, iz kojih ćete onda izvući zaključak, odnosno ili izvlačiti zaključke kako biste zaokružili svoj argument. Dakle, u svakom slučaju da završimo uputstvo za domaći. Dakle, imate 2 teme. Teme su sledeće. Zapišite ili pamtite kako želite. Dakle, jedna opcija je Barbie is a good role model for young girls, a druga opcija je naravno suprotnost. Barbie is not a good role model for young girls. Barbie, I mean a doll. Okay? So once again, Barbie is a good role model for young girls, or Barbie is not a good role model for young girls. Dakle, imate 2 opcije, birate jednu. Sad, argumente ne pišete sami, ne pišete individualno, nego pišete u grupama. Dakle, ja ih neću određivati, vi ćete se sami u okviru ove svoje grupe B dogovoriti, znači sami oformite timove od 4 do 5 ljudi. Dakle, u svakom timu treba da bude 4 ili 5 vas, dakle, oformite sami svoje timove kako želite i svaki tim treba da sastavi 3 argumenta na jednu od ove 2 izabrane teme u dužini ne većoj od jedne kucane stranice u Wordu, dakle, prored 1,5. I to je sve. Domaći treba da mi pošaljete mailom u Wordu, znači da to bude Word dokument, pošaljete mi mailom do nedelje 7. marta. Znači, zaključno sa nedeljom, nedelja 7. mart je poslednji dan za slanje domaćeg zadatka. I naravno u tom Word dokumentu ili u samom mailu, kako želite mi, molim vas, naznačite ko su članovi tima koji šalje domaći, da bih uopšte znala kome da dam poene za domaći. Dakle, domaći zadatak sam objasnila, rok za slanje domaćeg zadatka je nedelja 7. mart. Dakle, to je krajnji rok za slanje domaćeg. Nakon toga, u ponedeljak, ja ću da prikupim vaše zadatke sve, da ih pregledam i onda, kad se čujemo i vidimo utorak, sledeći put, ja ću vam dati uopšteno komentare, znači napravit ću jednu analizu grešaka, da vidim otprilike kako ste vi to uradili i onda ću vam dati komentare uopšteno šta je bilo dobro, šta nije bilo dobro, dakle daću i ono što je bilo pozitivno i ono što je bilo negativno i onda ćemo još malo razgovarati o tome i u svakom slučaju imat ćete prilike onda da me pitate sve što vam nije jasno, možete me pitati i vezano za vaše konkretne teme. To ćemo raditi onda sledećeg utorka i sa time smo završili pripremu. Nakon toga, od 16. marta, krećemo sa vašim prezentacijama. Eto, toliko za danas. Imate li nekih pitanja? No? Okay then. Thank you for attending this lesson. That would be all for today. See you next week. And don't forget to do your homework. Bye.